If you're confused about Medicare for all, Medicare for America, all this stuff about Medicare that is being bannered around by the Democrats as they claw over each other to get the party's nomination for the 2020 presidential race, we're going to try and get to the bottom of what the difference is and what might be the more advantageous plan. So we're going to get into that coming up after the news at 1:05.
Now, your host, Ken Brew, on News Radio 700 WLW.
Welcome back, 700 WLW 107. Glad you're with us on this glorious Saturday. Why is it a glorious Saturday? You and I get a chance to talk. So, you can't help but pay attention. It sucks you in. Just when you thought you were out, it sucks you back in. All the candidates on the Democratic side of the political equation, all vying, clawing, stepping over each other. Not as bad as it's going to be in about 4 months to try and get the nomination. But one of the things I think that will be the epicenter of this campaign and this election will be health care. I think it's the number one thing, and as soon as the Democrats can stop getting consumed with the Trump and Russia and all the other stuff where the wind seems to be coming out of the sails, as soon as they get by that, as soon as they get by the fact that the Green New Day is just absolutely unaffordable and is a non-starter in its present form, once they get past all of that, they will land on what I think is a central topic for every single American, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, whatever, however there may be a distinction between all of us. And it's health care, because we have two things in common. One, we all get sick, and two, we are all aging. If you're not aging, then obviously you know what the alternative is. But you have Bernie Sanders running around saying the single-payer Medicare for all plan is the best. And there's another guy running around trying to get elected, Robert Francis Patrick, you know him as Beta O'Rourke, has thrown his support to another health care plan that he designs or calls Medicare for America. Now, what do those two plans have in common? They both have the word Medicare in it, and it can be very, very confusing even if you are well-versed in these things. Just try figuring out what your health care is going to look like once you stop working for someone who is paying for a large part of that health care. So I'm trying to get a little bit of understanding here for all of us that are approaching or have approached the day when we have to register and use Medicare. And that's why I'm tickled to death that J.O., who is the author of Maximize Your Medicare, Understanding Medicare, Protecting Your Health, and Minimizing Costs, has graciously accepted our invitation to join us here on 700 WLW. And J.O., welcome to 700 WLW. How are you?
Ken, thank you very much for having me. Your introduction, perfect, really.
Well, let me just say this. I have reached a point in my life, not quite, but very close, where I've got to figure out what I'm doing with Medicare, and I'm a lost ball. I've read everything that I can on it. I've heard all the opinions. I've heard about Medicare for all, Medicare for America. I've heard about plans A, B, and then whatever they might have for drugs and whatever they might have for an over umbrella. It's just, it's a little overwhelming. But I want to talk first about this Medicare for all that Bernie Sanders has been in a lather over for the last 5 years since he first started running for president. Medicare for all, to me, looks like we're going to make everybody a ward of the state. We're going to make doctors a ward of the state. We're going to make hospitals a ward of the state. In essence, our tax dollars, by and large, are going to pay for the existence of these people. I don't know if America has the stomach for it, and then in the aftermath, I don't know if that's what's best for America. So on that point, can you help me out?
Sure. Generally speaking, I would agree with you, which is, before we get into Medicare as it currently stands, the Medicare for All proposal would be a complete overhaul, meaning that there would be a single payer, a single determinant of payment, and like you correctly pointed out, that also means that the receivers of the payment, doctors, hospitals, who are compensated at much lower rates today under Medicare, well, that gets expanded to the entire nation. And the practical reality is going to be very difficult for lots of stakeholders in the system to swallow. 20% of the GDP involved in the healthcare delivery system, not even talking about all the other ancillary businesses running around to the side.
Yeah. It sounds like it would be Obamacare on steroids.
I would actually call it, because it's single payer, there literally would be, for example, if you work at a large employer or a small employer, where the employer contributes to your health insurance policy, then those would all instantly disappear. And that is going to cause turmoil and upheaval amongst those people who are satisfied with their large employer-provided plan.
Sure, and that goes away. So that goes away, regardless of how good or how bad it may be, regardless of what you're paying a month for it, regardless of what your deduction is. That goes away. There's also an ancillary effect on all this, and that's what happens after you're done with that employer, like retiree health benefits. What happens to those?
Well, I think that the persons, and it's going to be a very, very difficult way to communicate to the American public and the electorate as a whole, which is that by that same token, if you have a universal health coverage, meaning that all of your costs are known and it is provided by the federal government, then the retiree health plan is not required. Because since the federal government will be handling the matter, then the underfunded liabilities that do exist, and that is a ticking time bomb that many municipalities, states face today, that would go away. So I don't want to say that today, because we're just here in the second inning, third inning maybe. We're gonna have to have some big decisions being made. I'm not sure. I'm not the person to ask on that, whether or not the entire nation is ready to swallow the entirety of that complete restructuring.
All right, so let's compare this to what Beto O'Rourke is suggesting, which is it's Medicare for America. And from what I can tell from this is, yes, there would be an option under this plan for you not to take the single-payer plan, that you could get supplemental policies. It's Medicare expanded with supplemental policies. In reality, this is more like the Affordable Care Act. It's an expanded version of it. Is this in its plan? And I'm sure there are plenty of places we can all go to online. We don't need to specifically, what's every single difference. But my point being, this seems to be, between the two, the more reasonable of the two plans, right?
It would keep the ability for persons, if they are covered by their employer, to maintain and stay on their existing plan. It'll also allow for persons to opt out if the financial cost to the employee or employer are too expensive. They'd have to pay an extra tax, etc., in order to fund that, but that option does exist. It is a way that you can both have your existing plan. If you, for example, work at a very large employer and got very favorable contributions from your employer, then you could stay in your plan. Now, the ripple effects are going to still be enormous. I don't want to understate that here, because as currently constructed, Medicare for the 60 million who are already on the red, white, and blue card, the federal card, will be fundamentally changed. It would be fundamentally changed. And as you pointed out, and the reason to maximize your Medicare exists, the free newsletter website and other activities around what I've built for that is the fact that I've spoken to persons in many, many locations, including in Ohio, and the common thread is no one really understands the red, white, and blue card, the Medicare card, how it works today.
Yeah. Well, that's why
you're talking about.
Yeah, that's why all those boutique businesses have popped up, where you can pay a guy so much money, he'll sit down and do your best Medicare plan for you and this and that. I think the federal government has succeeded in one instance. It's made it as completely confusing for the average man and woman as possible. And I don't understand why it has to be that way to begin with.
Well, I would explain it in the following way, which is 60 million. It is just going to be very, very difficult to find a one-size-fits-all.
Yes, you're dead on. You're dead on there. One size fits all for nothing in this world should be one size fits all. And I just and again, when I say they've made it confusing, everybody has a different story and different needs, but there ought to be something where, okay, at least I have an idea about what all this is going to cost, whether it be these two new plans that have been implemented by O'Rourke or Sanders, or if it's something else that's out there. I think a lot of people, and frankly, I'm moving into that age. I'm a little overwhelmed by what I've got to do.
So what ends up happening here, Ken, is that the rules are confusing, the jargon is confusing, and making it especially difficult is the fact that the language may look the same, but it works differently than the way that you may currently be covered. Yeah. So you do have a new lexicon, a new jargon, a new set of definitions to understand. The good thing is that if you do correctly understand, and you talked about these guys, our professional business does do this for individuals and allowing, to find the efficient plans in many locations around the country, is the fact that because the rules are so heavily in the consumer's favor, and they really are, that once you get beyond the jargon, the rules, then you'll find that the menu is very, very good, fitting by far the most number of people at different price points, whatever fits the person's budget, their personal situation, whatever it might be. Private matters to them.
Right. And that's why I think your book, your Maximize Your Medicare, Understanding Medicare, Protecting Your Health, and Minimizing Cost is must read for anybody that's either about to or in the present Medicare system. Now, let's just say there's somebody out there that is approaching the age of 65 and they've got to enroll in Medicare. What is the biggest don't for them, and what is the residual effect if you pick the wrong coverage as you move from employment into retirement?
And it's becoming more extreme as more persons are crowding into the Medicare system. 10,000 people a day, that is demographic reality, which is the number one mistake by far. Is people try to play too close to the line on when their enrollment deadlines are. So I mentioned the fact that once the rules are known, that things are heavily in your favor. Mm-hmm. However, if you don't get the deadlines, if you don't enroll within the right windows, then what ends up happening is you have penalties. And those penalties are never-ending penalties. Those are not one-time penalties. Mm-hmm. And then in addition, it restricts your choice and when your coverage can begin. So it's not as if you could just call me or call us in July and say, okay, I feel sick, and then start up in August. That is not the way this works. Yeah. So as a result, then you've invited Murphy's Law into your home.
Right. Jay, where can we find your book? I'm sure in all the usual places like Amazon, brick and mortar stores. Where do we find it?
Yes, you can find it there, and the best place, and I would encourage people to do this, is MaximizeYourMedicare.com. There's a free newsletter, which does give, from beginner's corner to the deep end of the pool. MaximizeYourMedicare.com is the website. And then the links to where you can buy the book, both in paperback and ebook format.
This is, I'm telling you, that may be the best thing you can do as you navigate into your golden years. J.O., again, the author of the book, Maximize Your Medicare, Understanding Medicare, Protecting Your Health, and Minimizing Costs. And again, you can find that on MaximizeYourMedicare.com. Fascinating stuff, really good stuff. And thanks so much for joining us here on 700 WLW.
My privilege, Ken. Thank you for having me.
I can tell you, there are no do-overs. And if you're someone who's approaching 65, you have to apply for Medicare at the very least 3 months out. And then you have to figure out, well, that's just Medicare A. You'll have to purchase B, and then you'll have to figure out pharmaceuticals and all of that other stuff. And if he's right, if you don't do it right going in, it's kind of like Social Security. If you don't do it right going in, it is a lot of work to try and fix it, if indeed it can be fixed. I thought that was, for anybody that's 50 or older, I think that was just fantastic.